It was February 1994. A brand new game company was incorporated on the last day of the month by founder Ted Price, starting work on a Doom clone for the much hyped and promoted surefire hit, the Panasonic 3DO. Little did they know this company would go on to create sprawling universes, capturing the hearts of gamers young and old. Leaping generations upon generations of game systems and making the jump to the big screen, this company was about to produce one of the most prominent and beloved, still ongoing game franchises of all time. That company's name: Extreme Software. Ted Price wanted to make games. More specifically, a Doom game. Doom, the revolutionary first-person shooter released by id Software in 1993, was played by Price so much the inclination to make a similar product for consoles was an easy decision to make. Incorporating Extreme Software, Price set to work on his first ever video game, recruiting fellow Princeton graduate Alex Hastings later that year and his brother, Brian Hastings, soon after. After getting rejected by numerous publishers for their first game, Extreme found a home with Universal Interactive Studios, and the team worked on developing Disruptor. The game was to be released for the 3DO as development kits were inexpensive for the time. The 3DO itself was a highly promoted new console, even being named Time Magazine's 1993 Product of the Year, along with the likes of the Ford Mustang, personal digital assistants, and Mattis's low-fat ice cream. However, upon release, the 3DO was less than well received. By suggestion of Universal and their executive producer Mark Cerny, development was shifted to Sony Computer Entertainment's new PlayStation console. It wasn't much of a snag for Extreme Software, as the custom engine for Disruptor took just a month to convert to Sony's new platform. It helped that Universal Interactive Studios was brand new to the game industry and still learning, allowing creative flexibility for the development partners, including Extreme. One thing that couldn't be adapted to the new platform, unfortunately, was the company's name. Just 1 year into existence, and right before officially announcing Disruptor as their first title, a name change for the company was forced due to Extreme Software already being in use by a database company of all things. Numerous new names were thrown out: Ice9, Moon Turtle, Ragnarok Software, The Resistance, Incorporated. The name Insomniac was thrown in from Ted Price. There wasn't resounding agreement on the name. However, Insomniac was the first to clear legal, and thus Extreme Software was reborn as Insomniac Games. Disruptor was released November 30th, 1996 in North America, arriving in Europe 1 month later. The game received solid but not amazing reviews from publications praising its visuals, arsenal of weapons, and strategic gameplay. Criticisms were levied, however, towards the game simply being a Doom clone with changes some deemed not interesting enough to differentiate it from the competition. For example, the game's signature psionic abilities like shocking enemies and using a shield to block attacks. Of particular note were the full motion video cutscenes. They were called out for being cheesy and completely ridiculous, being so serious they came off as unintentionally comedic.
As soon as you lower this force field, there'll be hell to pay!
Hell was already paid, Lieutenant, by the innocent thousands who died on New Atlantis.
That's why you've always got to keep your eyes open. And watch your ass.
So I had them, shall we say, extracted from office.
Yeah? Well, it's quite comfortable, actually. I'm thinking about getting one for the barracks.
We're with the Alliance of Democracy, Jack, and we need your help.
Just remember, think fast, shoot fast, and kick ass.
Overall, however, Disruptor was regarded as an underdog game, the best game that nobody ever heard of, according to Price. The game received little to no advertising, and with its holiday release in competition with such titles on the PlayStation 1 like Tekken 2, Tomb Raider, Crash Bandicoot, and Bubsy 3D, Insomniac's first game release was a commercial failure, said Price.
I felt at the time the team was kind of down. The game didn't really sell. We sort of needed a breath of fresh air.
For their next project, it was time to pivot. While considering what to produce next, Mark Cerny brought up the fact that Nintendo had cornered the family market to extreme success, and the PlayStation console was sorely lacking in family-friendly games. At the same time, Al Hastings had developed a new engine for use on the PlayStation that would allow Insomniac to feature wide open vistas to potentially explore, wildly different from other games like Crash Bandicoot that featured linear, hallway-level design. After the intense, dark universe of Disruptor, Insomniac wanted to do something different. How about dragons, suggested Insomniac artist Craig Stitt, and thus Spyro the Dragon was born. Over the course of 3 years with one game a year released from 1998 to 2000, Spyro the Dragon became one of the PlayStation's most prominent characters, giving the company a mascot character along with Crash Bandicoot, the platforming franchise from Naughty Dog, also published by Universal Interactive. With a charming cast of characters, a light fantasy setting, a stellar score by Stuart Copeland, and fun level design to complement Spyro's versatile moves of gliding, charging, and fire breathing, Spyro was released to critical acclaim and stellar sales. Insomniac's second game was a hit. Sequels soon followed, with Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage releasing in 1999, and Spyro Year of the Dragon following that in 2000. Spyro was an absolute runaway success, with Year of the Dragon selling over 2 million copies worldwide alone. All three Spyro titles were also entered into the PlayStation Greatest Hits line, signifying strong sales across the board. It was a grand time to be at Insomniac, but with a major caveat. Under their deal with Universal Interactive, the beloved Purple Dragon was not the studio's to keep. The IP, intellectual property, they had created was not theirs to own. And after 3 games released in 3 years, Insomniac was ready to move on and try something new. Now at the end of the PlayStation 1 era, Insomniac had grown to a team of 30 people. With Universal maintaining the rights to Spyro, Insomniac made the decision to begin working directly with Sony on creating new games for their brand new console, the PlayStation 2. No more middleman. With the release of Spyro Year of the Dragon, Insomniac's 4-game partnership with Universal Interactive came to an end. In the middle of Spyro development in 1999, Insomniac began forming ideas for what would be their debut on the new PlayStation 2 system. The first, yes, first, concept that was developed was a game then known as Monster Knight, where players would control a fantasy non-human character named Mahdi, who could tame different classes of creatures and use them to fight. The creatures themselves would be captured by Mahdi and trained, evolving into stronger versions of themselves, giving the player more abilities and attacks to choose from. There was diversity in the creatures that could be captured, with them falling under different categories like weapons, items, transport, armor, and multi-class, being combinations of the other 4. One example of these creatures was the Swordling, a sword weapon with a shark-like head. Its first stage would be a basic melee weapon, able to fight enemies with it and potentially clear a path through environments. Its second stage of evolution would add on a bite ability, letting you hold onto objects and suspend Mahdi in air, while the third evolution would add a spit ability, allowing the shark head to shoot its teeth at enemies like projectiles, not unlike a gun. Other creature concepts were the Spitta, Ticklebug, and the Garamuth, to name a few. Monster Knight itself would have been a third-person action-adventure game with real-time combat and Legend of Zelda-like open worlds with multiple paths to follow, from various castles to more outlandish fantasy locales like a floating island. The game would have had a stronger focus on story as well, building a brand new fantasy world with a history and culture with an emphasis on the character development of Mahdi and various other characters. It still retained the whimsical fantasy adventure feel of the Spyro games, but aimed at a slightly older audience, as Insomniac was anticipating the PlayStation 2 to reach more adult gamers than the PlayStation 1. Another big ambition of Monster Knight was to create a world without loading screens, essentially one huge environment with multiple locations but without the need to fade to black to travel there. You'd get there completely in real time using the stronger processing power of the new console. While a bunch of concepts for Monster Knight were developed, the idea itself never truly gained traction within Insomniac's team, and they moved on to try something different. Monster Knight, while dropped, was on the right track of what Insomniac wanted to do. A game with platformer elements but isn't strictly just a platformer, and a game that was meant for an older, more mature audience with a stronger emphasis on character and storytelling. Whereas it was a Pokemon meets The Legend of Zelda, Insomniac's next attempt at a PS2 game would be Tomb Raider meets The Legend of Zelda, and would progress a lot further than Monster Knight ever did. Codenamed I-5, that is Insomniac's 5th game after Disruptor in the Spyro trilogy, the next foray into a PS2 game concept would be an idea that the team could really get behind, creating an action-adventure game that would shed Insomniac's reputation as purely a platforming game developer. Originally using Africa as a setting before being moved to Peru, I-5 would come to be known internally, somewhat jokingly, as Girl with a Stick. While a lot of the team was working on wrapping up Year of the Dragon, a few of the developers split off to really get to work on what would be Insomniac's PS2 PS2 debut. For real this time. Completely different from a purple dragon, the protagonist would be a young human woman with white hair with runes on her body that would glow when she performed martial arts. Not a platformer, not cartoony, more mature. Not too mature, however, just an older audience than the kids demographic that Spyro firmly landed in. This was the basis for i5. At E3 2000, Insomniac had to present the idea to Sony, and they gave the green light. The PS2 was a brand new console, and Insomniac had to build a new engine. A basic engine was pulled together remarkably quick, but the real clincher was fellow ex-Universal Interactive company Naughty Dog, now working on their first PS2 title, Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy, made the offer to share technology with Insomniac, giving them the ability to craft even larger worlds than they thought possible. A natural evolution of the broad vistas of Spyro to the concepts of an open world on Monster Night. The design of Girl with a Stick would be a lot more grounded. While there is still fantasy and magic in the world, there wouldn't be technology, and environments would be a lot more tangible, more natural. The titular stick would allow the titular girl to fight and traverse environments, and one example being able to stick the stick into a wall, and then using it to propel herself into the air to other areas. She could also place it in a crank to turn bridges around for traversal. The stick, or staff's abilities, would increase throughout the game, gaining such powers as deviation, possession, even turning into smoke to pass through bars or even locked doors. Ambitious ideas abounded. Rock giants, destructive environments, arena battles with an audience full of monks, beast riding, a shaman lion known as Lionel Richie. Insomniac was aiming for the stars for their first PS2 game. There really was a solid foundation in place, and after a few months, the team had a playable demo concept. There was one problem though. It just wasn't fun. When creating art of any kind, there has to be passion for it to truly come alive. For Insomniac, even though Ted Price was pushing hard for Girl with a Stick, that passion just wasn't there. With Spyro, Insomniac had adopted an everything in the kitchen sink attitude towards design. Find what's fun and put it in the game. That philosophy had expanded by the third Spyro game to feature multiple playable characters and different gameplay styles. Reflecting the culture of the time, Spyro could now skateboard. With the focus on an older audience on a new system, however, that sense of spontaneity was lost in the development of i5. They had intended for the art style to be a big departure from Spyro, but in the end, the concepts the artists were putting out were still quite in the realm of cartoons, with many enemies having underbites reminiscent of the enemies found in the Spyro games, for example. The main protagonist's design changed several times too, for fear of being too generic. These changes would come months after being finalized, leading to a sense of stagnation and low energy on the project, and changing them led to a muddy vision of what the game was even supposed to be in the first place. The potential was there, but the game had too much going on. Gameplay mechanics were changed constantly, which would lead the developers to go back and rewrite code, a time-consuming process. The game's mature tone also was a drastic departure, and the sense of fun Insomniac had with the Spyro games was lost in the game's design and in the morale of the team. Showing the build to Sony was another warning sign.
What they said specifically was, hey look, if you guys want to release this, you can. We will support you. However, we don't think that there's going to be a market for this game.
Not the most positive news. But Price found it a blessing. If Sony had outright said they wanted to cancel the game, there might have been reason to try to push back harder and keep on with Girl with a Stick as a concept. However, Sony's support, with trepidation, forced Insomniac to take a step back and look at the game and see if it's really what they wanted to do. Half the team was not a fan, and that was enough. Insomniac canceled Girl with a Stick, and it was back to the drawing board on a new idea. This would be the only time in Insomniac's history that they outright dropped a game project already in development, never to be revived. Normally, with something as big as a game cancellation, the news can be hard to take. However, the cancellation of Girl with a Stick was like a weight that had been lifted off of Insomniac's shoulders. Sure, it was disappointing that they were back to square one on what would be their first PS2 title, feeling like a bullet had been dodged had they continued to work unhappily on a project for another 2 years that most didn't have any passion for. The PS2 was already on the market, and as other companies like Naughty Dog now had a head start on their leaps to the new system, Insomniac was behind. But they could finally regain that sense of fun and develop a project that everyone would be on board with. And now, back at the beginning of development, they gave themselves very little time to find the new i5. A wall was designated in the offices where anyone could put up an idea or concept for a game. Anything. It was Brian Hastings, one of the earliest members of Insomniac Games, that would post the idea of a little character who has cool weapons and flies from planet to planet. A radical departure from Spyro and Girl with a Stick. This concept rang true and the team was on board. Now into brainstorming mode. Insomniac threw everything they thought could work on that wall. On designing the new protagonist.
He was a lizard at one point. He was sort of a Marvin the Martian guy, which I think was sort of the original inspiration.
The idea grew and grew as developers threw more ideas around, like an arsenal of crazy, wacky sci-fi weapons for their lead character to use. A character who had now settled design-wise into a fox-eared, made-up furry alien creature dubbed a Lombax. The new i5 was coming together remarkably fast. Al Hastings' engine development on Girl with a Stick helped too, and very quickly in just a few months, Insomniac had a prototype for this new concept that Sony enthusiastically approved of. There was just one thing missing. One goal Insomniac didn't want to lose from Girl with a Stick and Monster Knight previously was a new emphasis on narrative and character. The Spyro games had steadily grown more narrative focused with more cutscenes, voice acting, and general character interaction. Now with the power of the PlayStation 2, Insomniac could push those narrative, more cinematic story ideas a lot further. So what if this alien creature had a small robot sidekick? Better yet, a small robot sidekick as a backpack.